Hello, everybody. It is your 3 hour and 54 minutes of sleep, Tristan. How is everyone doing tonight? Yeah. Hello, everyone. This is Step Back Tonight. It is a show I do on the Tuesdays of the week in which I hang out with y'all, answer some questions, hang out, chill. I was a little bit late because I was listening to music to get myself pumped up. So I am ready. I've got Kelly manning the questions, so I'll be able to pay attention to those. But I can already see, before the stream even started, a whole bunch of super chats. Literally, let's see, let's get the total here. $7, $9, $11. $11 from Ariel Fernandez. Well, thank you so much for getting us started on the right foot. Much appreciated. You guys are all amazing human beings for coming out and showing your support, because I would not be doing this if it wasn't for you guys. And especially for the people who have made the decision to support financially. I can't believe it's happening, but we're getting there. I have possible good news later on, but not tonight on that front. But yes. By the way, also, if you are a person who does not have the resources to be a patron or whatever, trust me, totally makes sense. But if you want to help out, sharing is caring. So, sharing Step Back videos to your favorite subreddit, your friends, your internet communities, all those kinds of things. It all really helps because the algorithm is not my friend. Step Back has, in comparison to some other YouTube channels, had actually quite steady but slow growth. According to Morning Fame, which is like a YouTube analytics service, Step Back is actually weak in the subscriber growth departments because I don't get recommended out that much. So please share. Or, don't. That's cool too. As long as you're enjoying the ride, that's all that counts. So, I'm looking for collecting a couple questions. I think Ariel in all of those super chats had a question in the pre-start of stream super chats. Don't you sometimes go to Twitter or any other social media and think that maybe not everyone should be able to vote even if they're a citizen? Oh boy. I imagine that's a rhetorical question. So I'm just gonna go with I'm very much for voting. If everyone can get voting. Still getting myself a little pepped up here. So, is there anybody in the chat who this is their first time here in a Step Back Tonight stream or in a Step Back stream in general? Please make yourself known. Speak up in the chat. I want to see all your pretty faces, all your little icons saying hello. There's someone typing in Arabic, so maybe. I don't know. I cannot read Arabic. Or at least the Arabic alphabet. Whew. And I can talk. Let's see. What can I talk about? The kind of stuff that I have been up to in Step Back land. So this week is gonna be has been an intense week. As some of you might know, I have a new Step Back video coming out on Friday. that I am in the animation stage for right now. So I'm hoping to get it done soon because I have many more projects with tight deadlines also waiting for right after it's done. So life is a little busy this week. And so what can you do? But yeah, expect a video on Friday. It will be fun. It will be great. I have plans to next, and then I got a script because I'm actually, for anybody who cares, after I finish this video that comes out on Friday, then I am I'm going to the YouTube space on the 10th, on June 10th, and so I gotta get working on a script for that. So life moves along. All right, I feel like I've been warming up the audience enough that I can probably get started digging into y'all's questions. Okay, let's see. You guys always ask very brain intense questions, so I just gotta get that cerebral cortex all the juice it requires. Okay, I think I'm getting there. All right. First question. Did you know HUD are rolling back Obama-era regulations that say homeless shelters can't force trans people to bunk with people belonging to the gender they were assigned at birth? All right, let me break that sentence down. Did you know Housing and Urban Development are rolling back Obama-era regulations that says homeless shelters can't force people to bunk with people belonging to the gender they were assigned at birth? Well, I will say I did not know that, and that really sucks. That's about it. Next question we got here is what is the most obscure historical field? Oh boy. Okay. There's two new ones that I think might be maybe the closest to be like, okay. The most obscure history I've seen a couple of pretty obscure topics for history. I can think of three. So one was a study of World War II era cookbooks and an analysis, like a big data analysis of hundreds of cookbooks to figure out about how Canadian culture changed because of rationing laws. So that was one master's thesis I saw. Another master's thesis I remembered was about, it was a medieval Middle Eastern thesis, and it was an economics history piece, and it was a study of Levantine olive oil press, like olive oil presses, like places that you take olives to make olive oil, and how they have changed over the how they changed in the eras between the Byzantine olive oil presses and the early Islamic olive oil presses. This was a guy I knew. He was a real person that I knew. There was also one guy I knew who was doing a dissertation on German POWs in Canada who were working in a northern Ontario prison camp, where they were working as like lumberjacks, and apparently they had a very positive experience there. But this person has been obsessed with finding the camps and having them like trying to get them restored and trying to find out where everything happened. I also knew another history PhD student who was doing a topic on 19th century magic tricks and trying to recreate how they worked using 3D printers. That was kind of like he was my dissertation sibling. Like, he had the exact same supervisors I did. And then I also remembered that I think somebody was talking about porn history, and there was a woman named Alex, who in my first master's did a feminist post-structural analysis of Playboy magazine in its first decade. So, those things all happen. As far as like fields of history go, there are fields of history that are getting quite obscure. One of like some of the it's like 1995 things. So there's one discipline that I would probably point out, which is that animal history has started to become a thing, which is studying about the lives of animals in the past using historical documents. That's kind of an obscure field. The other one now is children's history, the studying of the culture of children. It's some interesting things actually. There's some historical like playground, like child culture is actually very conservative, and we don't talk about it much because we kind of grow out of child culture, but there are things in like child playground culture that have been passed down. Some things have been passed down for centuries, and we did not know that until recently. I think that's really cool. Okay, and then you get into some like real heavy shit, like when you get into what's called nonlinear history, or which is the idea of getting rid of the idea of the passage of time as the key way to understand cause and effect in the past, and instead trying to delinearize things. One idea that came out of nonlinear history was the theoretical idea of teaching a U.S. history class starting with the present and working backwards, and showing how you can get new pieces of historical information if you try to look at things outside of the angle of linearity, outside of the arrow of time moving in the way that you think it's supposed to. It's very, I will say, it's very like esoteric type historical philosophy. It's very like open-ended. One of the books that I think is like really key in that is something called it's called Thousand Plateaus. If you're ever interested in what nonlinear history is about, which is actually a book that they claim is designed for you to actually open at any point and be able to start reading. I read it while I was doing my comprehensive exams for my PhD, and it was just one of the least comprehensible books I've ever read. It was very much like peak continental philosophy, if anybody knows anything about that. So, Ariel Fernandez, oh my goodness. Okay, so we've got 2 super chats. First, thank you for the $10 and the $5 super chats. Let's start with the first question here. Toot-toot. I like that, like 1995 success sound. So, first question. Who do you think will replace Theresa May as leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party as the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and Great Britain and Northern Ireland? Unfortunately, I know it's not really a $10 answer to a $10 question, but I have seen like lists of possible people to take over the Conservative Party, and it just seems like an endless parade of white dudes that I don't know. The only person who I think could possibly be a name that I recognize is that people have floated Boris Johnson, but I have a feeling that people don't really like Boris Johnson anymore, and so I don't imagine that Boris Johnson has a high chance of becoming the Conservative leader. But the rest of the names I don't even recognize because I'm not super plugged into British politics. I know that I like, keep in mind my political explanation is like connection is like, I live in Canada, and I live in Canada, and I am a U.S. historian who has a weird obsession and expertise in American political history and culture. But your second question: do you think the Canadian Liberal Party will be able to win re-election as an absolute majority, or will become a hung parliament? Okay, so there's two ways to look at it. So right now, things are kind of in flux. I think like a week ago, people were saying that Andrew Scheer held a pretty good chance of becoming prime minister, who's the leader of the Conservatives in Canada. But now this week, after Andrew Scheer kind of waffled and sort of took a non-committal stance towards abortion, about reopening the abortion debate, because in Canada the abortion debate is pretty much settled. It's not really a political thing, and it's one of my favorite things about Canadian politics is that actually it's considered like a dirty word to be called a social conservative, and the Conservative Party actively tries to reject the label of social conservative. But Andrew Scheer basically said, we're not going to touch it. We're just not going to, like, if conservative MPs want to be anti-abortion, they can totally do it. But the Conservative Party has no platform about getting involved in this debate. And that made both, like, the small constituent of pro-lifers in Canada, who are not numerous, angry, but at the same time it made everyone else be angry, because it's like, oh, so you're not going to like stop it. Like Justin Trudeau, for all of his problems, one of the first things he did as the leader of the Liberal Party said that every single Liberal MP has to be pro-abortion or they're getting kicked out of the party. And he actually did it. He kicked a few people out because they wouldn't change their stance on abortion. So, there's that. But now, this week, we have there's like a guy, I think his name, I'm trying to remember what his name is. I think it's called, let me just a second. So yeah, there's a website called 308.com, and it's run by this guy by the name of God, what the hell's this guy's name? It's a French name, I know that. I can get it for you in a second. Oh yeah, Eric Grenier. So Eric Grenier is a Eric Grenier, and his page is his website, freaking 208.com. It's a total attempt to try to be like 358. And he's trying to become the Nate Silver of Canada. So from what I know about the situation for the Canadian election, because Canada's got a federal election coming up in October, that it's in flux. It's totally still like could be anybody's game. And I will say that it was this time, like last year, that we were just starting to come around to realizing that Doug Ford was going to be premier. And so, like, the thing about Canada and the thing about Canadian elections is that they're not these, like, multi-year affairs. Like, the writ's going to get dropped in September sometime, and you're going to have the official election season, and it's going to be, like, a month and a bit. And when that happens, you're going to have that's when you're going to have all the debates. It's when all, like, the serious stuff's going to go down. And if I've learned anything about Canadian history or Canadian politics in the last few election cycles, is that elections really matter. Like, the status that people have going into the election is very doesn't matter as much as the stuff that happens, because, like, it seems like day to day people will change their allegiances. But to kind of boil down, do I think that the Liberals would have an uphill battle to try and maintain a majority government. But I am still in the thought that the Liberals will probably maintain at least a minority government. They could get a majority government, but I think that is less likely. But they will probably get a minority government just because Andrew Scheer has just done no work whatsoever to really become all of that prominent of a figure. Like, he's not really that inspiring of a conservative leader, and nobody knows who he is, nor do they care. And I do think that the Liberals are probably going to pick up some seats because from the NDP, because Jagmeet Singh is not exactly he's a bit more of like a person who people recognize the name of in Canadian politics, but but most of the time it's because they don't like him. He's kind of a lackluster figure as well, because the NDP is afraid of bold leadership. So they chose the most like happy, watered down person they could get to be the leader of the party. So Jagmeet Singh will probably not do well, especially because a lot of the NDP's stronghold is in Quebec, and Quebec is super duper racist, and having an Indian Canadian who is a Sikh, wears a turban as the leader of the NDP for the racist contingent of the Quebecois NDP is probably not going to do well for them. I'm not saying that's a thing I endorse. I think that's just disgusting, but here we are. That's our life. That's how things are. This is the world we live in. Canada's, like, the last election we had federally was in 2015, and that was like the last election. Like, I think that the month that Canada elected Justin Trudeau was the month where the Bernie Sanders, like the first Democratic primary debate happened, where a whole bunch of people got booted out of the Democratic field and such. So I think that the 25th, like, it was the last election before the world started going crazy, and so this is going to be our first like post like fascism as a thing again election. So that'll be fun. All right. I'm not sure if that's a hung parliament. It'll be a minority government, though. All right. What if Romney won the 2012 election instead of Obama? What would the political climate be like? Ooh. I don't know too much about Mitt Romney as, like, presidential leader. My guess is that if he had won in 2012, from how center of the road he is, that he probably wouldn't have agitated liberals all that much. Like, if I remember, Mitt Romney is not exactly like a hard right Republican. He's very right wing, but he's more polite about it. And I think that a lot of the hashtag resistance liberal people are more angry about how rude the president is rather than like the stuff that he's doing, because the stuff he's doing is, you know, previous administrations have done similar things, both Republican and Democrat. He's just more brash. And yeah, he has pushed the line a little bit. So we'll see. But Mitt Romney, I remember, had that policy of like, hey, let's just make life so hard to live in for undocumented migrants in America that they choose to leave. And so there's definitely less fashy overtones to that, but I do think that Mitt Romney, basically I think Mitt Romney would be watered down enough that it'd be like if Jeb was president right now, like that, like, you know, Ezra Klein would probably be pretty nice to him, which means that right now we'd probably be in Mitt Romney's second term instead of, like, you know, Trump world. I remembered in fall of 2015, my American history professor, or the person who I worked for as a TA, said that his prediction was that the election was going to come down to Hillary Clinton and Jeb Bush, and that Jeb Bush would win. That's how much politics makes no fucking sense anymore. Is that's what everyone was expecting. Like, everybody was pretty much convinced that it was going to be Jeb Bush and Hillary Clinton, and that Jeb would win. Well, some people thought Clinton could win, but I think that most people were like, Jeb will probably win. Because, the Obama 8 years and everything like that. Jeb. So, yeah. Just shows that the world is broken. We broke everything. The system's gone. And there are some people, especially the people who hate on my man Bernie in the Democratic camp, who think that, if we just get another centrist back, if we just get Beto or Kamala or any of those neoliberals from the party, if we just get them, we just put them in, and things will just go back to normal, and we could just forget this all happened, and the Overton window can be reshut. And it's like, friends, I don't think so. I think y'all broke something, and I don't think it's coming back. The center cannot hold. I think my favorite redemption story, the Zuko of American politics, Peter Dow, tweeted today that the reason why you think the thing is the center in America is the right now, and it's gone. The right is gone, and now your choice is between an actual left and white nationalism. And there you go. The center is dead, and the people who are clinging onto the center are dwindling in number and clinging on to a dying ideology that I think if a centrist becomes president in 2020, that you're going to get like President Tom Cotton or something in 2024. But if Romney was president, I think that things would have been a lot more chill. Because I think that you'd probably would have had until 2024 before stuff started really breaking. Because Hillary Clinton wouldn't have run in 2016 if it was Romney's second run. Nobody, with the exception of this cycle, nobody serious usually runs against a president going for their second term. It's usually people who have outside chances because they know that they don't have much of a shot. Or at least they know that the cards are stacked against them unless they're really unpopular. Like Mitt Romney. Okay. Next question. Did you hear the Amazonas prison massacres where in Brazil yesterday 55 prisoners were killed? I did not know that. I'm glad that I can learn from you guys about how HUD is explicitly, cracking down and being especially cruel and discriminating against trans people, and that the fascist government of Brazil is literally killing prisoners. I'm glad this is good. This is good that you can bring this news to me. I have invited this upon myself. What kind of milkshake should I use to kill fascists with? Well, the chunky ones are usually pretty good, but it depends upon how far, the security detail of your fascist. Like if we're in a Carl Benjamin situation where he doesn't have a really good detail, you can use a real thick one, a real chunky one, because then that you're going to be able to and soy is also a very good option for these milkshakes. You can use a real thick one because you'll be able to get in range. But if say you're going for Mitch McConnell, he's going to have a lot of security detail who might shoot you. So you're going to probably want to get something a little runnier so that you can go for some range. think like the time when George Bush got hit with a shoe. Like, you're going to need to get some real wind on that milkshake, and so you want to go for a bit of a runnier one. Or, yeah, you can put it on a drone. I remembered when I was an undergrad, somebody flew a drone with a dildo attached to it over a football game. So, you could always do a drone shake. Yeah, I mean, like, if the American military is going to use Predator drones to bomb weddings of brown people, then yeah, you could totally use a drone as a milkshake delivery device. That's probably how someone's going to monetize this milkshake moment. I mean, Burger King's already tried, right? Step Back History does not endorse political assassinations. No, milkshakes and shoes only. Okay. How was the reaction to 9/11 different in Canada than the US, if it was different? This is an interesting question, actually. So, I will mention I was pretty young when 9/11 happened. I was only 12, I want to say. Yeah, almost 13. So I was still pretty young. I think a lot of experiences were similar, maybe toned down a little bit. Like, I know that there were some people who, in America, when 9/11 went down, they got sent home from school, and that, like, the watching the news and everything like that basically took over the programming of the school day on that day. That wasn't really the story in Canada. When 9/11 happened, I remembered that nobody told us about it publicly. The school didn't say anything about it or anything like that. What we heard, the only stuff that we did hear is during the normal school day, some kids who go home for lunch came back saying that that something had gone down, that a plane had hit the Pentagon, I think I remember hearing. And it wasn't until we got home from school, so 3:30 in the afternoon or whatever, that it really hit what had gone on. And then the next day, we had our homeroom teacher make our homeroom teacher kind of had we had to have turning around the desk and putting his leg up and being like, all right, guys, let's gab about 9/11. How do you guys feel? But that wasn't until the next day. So I feel like in some ways that experience is similar to the United States. Like, we did spend pretty much the entire night watching CNN and watching the same stuff over and over again. But I do feel like the full takeover of the rhythm of life was a little different. Now, I was luckily in a situation where my cousin lived in New York at that time, and I did not know about anything that had gone down with the World Trade Center before I got home from school. So I didn't have to worry about that. So I didn't know what was going on until he was already safe. So there's that. But that's all I can remember. That's like the maximum that was like the 9/11 experience in Canada. And from everybody that I've been told in America, the second 9/11 happened, there was no more classes. That a lot of people were brought to these impromptu school assemblies where they just watched TV, and they had the TVs roped in. That was I think that happened in a lot of places. That did not happen where we were. So these are almost 18-year-old memories now, so I'm trying to really dig back. But honestly, I think to answer your question, Gad, I think it was pretty similar for most Canadians and Americans. Maybe we felt a little less scared. I do think that because I grew up in a much more, racially diverse part of the country, that like in the immediate post 9/11 moment, there was less of like the being terrified of Muslims and such, because I had grown up with Muslims my entire childhood, so I didn't make that connection quite yet. And I watched it happen as I grew up, and that's what made me like really, if you haven't noticed, if the content of Step Back hasn't like clued you in yet, I have quite a bugbear about Islamophobia, so there's that. Yeah. That's about the limits, because like I said, I was 12, so my comprehension of everything that was going on was a little low. Is it better to be a Mesopotamian in 2019 BC or a minimum wage earning Canadian in 2019 AD? I imagine it'd be better to be a king in 2019 BC on most fronts, except for maybe like, might have to eat some shittier food. But I mean, you don't have to work like 4 jobs, and you don't have to worry about your home. Probably clean air, good sun, lots of dates. Sounds good to me. Just you might die of infection or something, rather than like, I don't know, dying of whatever it is people die of these days. Not being able to afford healthcare. How do you feel about Theresa May's resignation? I don't feel a whole lot. I feel like Theresa May, the Prime Minister of the UK, is stepping down, I think, on June 9th. She basically put in her 2 weeks notice. As far as what I know, she's like, this was a long time coming. I imagine that most people, the surprise is that this didn't happen sooner, that she clung on to power for so long. But now she's officially resigning, and I imagine the Conservative Party is in a complete disarray. I imagine that I don't know what that means about I don't really know where that means Brexit is anymore. I imagine not many people do. That's the thing with the UK right now. The UK is like in complete political chaos and like complete upheaval. Like nobody knows what's happening anymore. And so I imagine like the UK was supposed to have left the EU at the end of March. It's now May. They had to have a rushed impromptu EU Parliament election, which they did. And now the Prime Minister is resigning. And so are they going to do further Brexit negotiations with a Prime Minister who wasn't elected? I imagine the Conservatives would not push for another election right now, because if they did, they'd probably lose and Jeremy Corbyn would be Prime Minister. And I imagine the Conservatives know that, and they wouldn't do it for that reason. So are they gonna do Brexit with an unelected Prime Minister? Or are they going to opt for I imagine the leadership race of the Conservative Party is going to be down to like who's pro second referendum and who is pro sticking with Brexit. That's what I imagine it's about now. We'll see what comes out of that. I feel like the UK is having a moment. What historical precedents provide guidance on being crime and doing gay? Well, oh gosh, how do I answer this question? So, I mean, You can definitely look to, I think that the Stonewall riots are a pretty good example of being gay and doing crimes in the best way possible. I did a video on the Stonewall riots. You can go and look it up. I think that it was one of my more better received videos, and it's one of the ones I'm the more proud of. But those were some very gay people who did very much crimes. And the radical, like, ACT UP, the AIDS crisis activists in the 80s who were like throwing the ashes of their dead friends on the White House lawn because Ronald Reagan wouldn't respond to the AIDS crisis. That is some pretty awesome being gay and doing crimes. Oh, Julie Dobbing. I feel like, okay, is Julie Dobaji or whatever? She's like this queer opera singer who like was also a swashbuckler or something, from like the 19th century or whatever. So she did gay and crimes. Awesome. I should just make a video of like, here are a list of people who did gay and crimes. If I remember, she was like a swashbuckler of some kind, and also was an actor or something. But definitely dueling and having multiple affairs with men and women qualifies as being gay and doing crimes. So, sounds pretty badass. Just a video. It's just a list of people who did gay and be crimes. Okay. I have taken a new interest in the South, particularly the Upper South and poor white culture. Anywhere I go for research on that, or do you have anything? Yeah. Logan, there's an entire field of American studies which is called whiteness studies, and it's about studying the identity of whiteness and whiteness as a thing. I say as like the light from my lamp is making me look like extra white right now. But yeah, there is totally a whole field of whiteness studies. Oh gosh, it's called. There's a book I read for my graduate school work for my comprehensive exams for my PhD that was on this, and it was called The Wages of Whiteness. That might be a good book for you to start. It's a bit old now, but it should still be good. So, it's called The Wages of Whiteness. And that should, if you like, Google around that author and like that book, you'll probably find like I think that The Wages of Whiteness started the like advent of whiteness studies. And there's a whole bunch of Americanists who are on white who do whiteness work. The Wages of Whiteness. Somebody asked me what it's about. Combining classical Marxism psychoanalysis and new labor theory pioneered by E.P. Thompson and Herbert Gutmann, Robert Rodier. Widely acclaimed book provides. Let me just open this up. Provides an original study of the formative years of working-class racism in the United States. This, he argues, cannot be explained simply with reference to economic disadvantage. Rather, white working-class racism is underpinned by a complex series of psychological and ideological mechanisms that reinforce racial stereotypes and thus help forge the identities of white workers in opposition to blacks. So, like, the idea of, like, whiteness studies is that, like how indigeneity, right? Like how Native American was not a identity that people had until there were Europeans colonizing them. And then they kind of created a greater identity. The powerful identity, like no less real very like strong. Like, you know, native pride is is a thing. Um, but whiteness also kind of exists in this frame of building a personal identity, building an like it kind of goes all the way back to like American slavery, about like how poor white people in the South like built their identity about how they could not be black, how not black they were, how they could you know, reference to themselves in opposition to slaves. And this continues to today. So I think that it's from what that sounds like, from what I remember, it's like it's the beginning of what's called the cultural turn in American historiography. So in the early 90s was when historians started to really embrace cultural theory and postmodern analysis of sources. And so this is like sort of a Marxist, but also a study of like psychoanalysis and all those kinds of things all mixed together, because, you know, it's cultural studies. You can do everything. Yeah. Whiteness studies is interesting. I think you'll get a lot out of that. Why does Alberta have no rats? What are you talking about? They have an entire parliament full of them. They have an entire energy sector, which is basically full of rats. I don't know. I did not know that Alberta had no rats. I thought I would think they would. Rats are everywhere. Unless it's a setup for a joke that I don't know of. Anyways. What are your thoughts on shared culture in societies, and what role is it? What are your thoughts on shared culture in societies? What role does it play as an important in trends you see emerging today? Shared culture? I'm not okay. So this is from Luis Sosa. I'm not exactly sure what you're. Can you reframe the question for me? I'm not exactly sure I understand what you're trying to say. I'll do the next question while you do that. Why didn't Canadians develop the aversion to social democracy Americans did? Canada had a Red Scare similar to America, yet you have Medicare for all. Because Canada, like the socialist movement, the social democracy movement in Canada, and the welfare state, and like a lot of the things we have come from, not from the cities. They come from, in a lot of times, where a lot of the radical left came from in America, from rural places. So like the reason why we have public health care was because of a Saskatchewan-based politician by the name of Tommy Douglas, who ran a party called the Social Credit Party, which was the forerunner to the NDP. And it was intense at one point. Like the doctors went on, or threatened to go on strike at one point. But I guess like the thing is, like, I'm not exactly sure why Canada didn't actively. I guess we didn't have as violent a history of labor history as the United States had, so our unions were still strong enough. They weren't actively suppressed. And on top of that, it's a very rural country, and there's a lot of big rural areas that were full of socialists. If you look at the history of Saskatchewan, Saskatchewan's been a very left-wing province up until very recently. Like they had things that you would almost consider Soviet. Like for a long time they had a public corporation that bought all of the wheat from all of the farms to sell on the global market. So they like collectivized all of the farming. And even to this day, the largest company in Saskatchewan is a co-op. So, I don't know. And also keep in mind Canadian identity about trying to find the things that we can attach to ourselves about how not American we can be. I talked about it in my War of 1812 video. So there is something to say about that. And I think that Canadians have latched onto our public healthcare service as a way to differentiate ourselves from the United States, as the United States doubled down on not doing that. And also I think it comes down to the political culture of Canada. Canada doesn't have the Electoral College. The Electoral College heavily disincentivizes third parties. And so in Canada, with a parliamentary system, we're much more likely to have a Labour Party to represent those interests. And so it's still around. I bet Canada would have, or I bet America would have a Labour Party too, if it had a parliamentary system and not a like presidential republic with like the what's it called, with the Electoral College. And even so, there is some like the NDP eventually did have to get rid of the word socialist from their charter. Now they're talking about bringing it back, but for the longest time, like the NDP does try to assuage fears that they're secretly socialists. I think it's a thing they should abandon, but that's just me. Okay. Sorry. Gotta get these yawns out of my system. It's getting warm in here. That's why it's happening. I gotta open the window and turn on the fan. Much better. Although the ramen shop is now, that's right directly below my apartment, is like full going, and I'm like, smells like ramen. Okay. What year in the near future do you think political unrest and change will happen? That's... I can't make a guess on that. I imagine it's less than 50 years, but probably more than 10. That's what I would say. In AD 2101, because war was beginning. I know there's a few fellow middle of the mid-generation millennials in here who remember that gag. What happened? Someone set up us the bomb. We get signal. What? Okay, I'll finish. Okay. Do you believe that the West's corporatism is killing the aesthetic of its culture? If so, do you believe this intersects with what's presented in cyberpunk worlds? A lot of cyberpunk aesthetic is like about the cultural hegemony of like China and Japan, isn't it? Isn't that? I'm trying to remember. Like, so like the idea of like the West killing the aesthetic of its own culture and then having another one come in. Oh boy. I am very lost as to how to answer this question. Okay. Let's do this. There's 50 of you right now? Holy moly. Okay. Okay, is there a sense that the U.S., that like corporatists, like corporations and, you know, late stage capitalism like absorbs the absorbs culture from all over the place and sort of turns it into this kind of like flavorless slurry? Yes, definitely. The fact that there's like you can get a Big Mac in virtually any corner of the planet speaks to that quite a bit. Is that happening in the West? Sure. Name, like, what's it called? I had a conversation on the weekend with an American who she needed help pointing to a uniquely American food as an example. All right. Argos Panoptes. Thoughts on Sargon of Akkad's campaign? All I can think about that one. My response to all of Carl Benjamin's like run for UKIP in the EU Parliament is that old rage face comic of like lol. I have never seen somebody implode so hard as he did. The second anybody got any wind of him, so like the second he starts like running for EU Parliament, the like every major news outlet obviously found they obviously got like one of their underlings to go and watch through all of the Sargon of Akkad video history. They found there was a time when people were pointing out that he did cocaine on a stream once. There was the child porn stuff, so he was under criminal investigation for that. Then he, when he was asked about the time when he said "I wouldn't even rape you" to a British MP, he doubled down on that. UKIP started distancing themselves from him, but he was like the entire news cycle for UKIP. And then it got to the point where like he couldn't go out in public and campaign without people like throwing fish at him and milkshakes at him, and he just like completely publicly embarrassed himself. And like now he didn't win. If I remember, not him, but the other guy, Tommy Robinson, who's like another like neo-Nazi who ran for UKIP's EU Parliament thing. He ran, and he got so few votes that he couldn't even get his deposit back for getting on the ballot. Like, he paid £5,000 so that he could be on the ballot, and I guess if you get over a certain threshold of votes, you don't have to, you get that money back. And he got so few votes, he didn't even get it back. Sargon is now like, all right, so think about like where Carl Benjamin is now. His YouTube channel's demonetized, so now he can't run ads on his channel. He's banned from Patreon, so he's just waiting for whenever, what's it called? Whenever like the free speech the Nazi Patreon gets started so that he can get on there. He's banned from Twitter. He's banned from like every social media site except YouTube. And on YouTube he can't run ads on his videos. Like, what's left? Like, he's so done. I have no idea how he must be at like the absolute nadir of his career right now. And this is someone who's gone to some pretty insane lows. He's going to probably try to come back to YouTube, but like, I have no idea how he's doing in YouTube anymore. He's still got an audience, obviously, but like, he's running out of ways to be monetized. And trust me, the way the winds are blowing, there will be a time when YouTube will kick Carl off of his platform, and then they'll probably make a frozen peach version of YouTube that no one will go to. I feel like maybe he'll end up becoming an InfoWars contributor. That seems like his natural next step, you know? Okay. But you know what? I feel like I feel complete. The only person who I feel bad about in that whole thing is that Carl's got a son, doesn't he? And he's like pretty young, like he's like not even 10. I feel pretty embarrassed for that kid, and I hope that somehow that kid actually gets away. And does, hope that kid does not become like his father. That's all I hope. But I don't know anything else. But yeah, Carl is a bad person. He has made the internet a worse place for him being in it. And so now that literally nobody wants anything to do with him, I hope that he just leaves public society. I don't even know if he can get a job anymore. No one would hire him. I don't even know what he would do, but I don't care. I just want him to just stop ruining things. Okay. Will you do more quick steps about each of the 2020 presidential candidates? Please do. And if you do, I'm looking forward to the quick step on Kamala Harris. Well, some random geek, I got what I can only refer to as overwhelming positive reactions to the series. And the stats on the series, like I did say that I was going to, when I said that when I started the series, I knew that, like, if you ask anybody if you want something, you're going to get it in the comments. People are going to say, yeah, I want this. But I got so many comments asking for me to do the rest of the series. And at the moment, this video is, for the first day after release, is 8% above average on views and 49% above average on watch time. And it is on a subject which, in the very rare set of circumstances for me, wound up with me not getting it demonetized. So that means that it is valuable in the money sense. It's obviously something that the audience wants to see. So yes, I'm definitely going to pick up the series and do Bernie Sanders next. Is it going to be like every single quick step? I doubt it. Unless something really big if something big comes up, I will definitely cover that instead. But I found a thing that people like, and I'm going to keep it going. And so the next one will be on Bernie Sanders. And then I think after that I get into Elizabeth Warren and then Kamala Harris, and then it gets to like the really little ones. I know that I got what I can only determine as a ridiculous, a metric fuck ton of requests to at least get the series to the point where I can cover Mike Gravel and Andrew Yang, who I think were the two most highly requested people to cover in the comments. And I would love to do it because I would love to like research the Mike Gravel campaign and be like, oh yeah, like this is an interesting thing he's doing because he doesn't actually want to be president. It's like a modeling the conversation thing, which I think is pretty cool. And Andrew Yang, where I can finally say why I have reservations and I'm worried about UBI. So, yeah, we'll do Bernie next. And then what I'm like kind of dreading though is when we get into like, should you back blah blah blah? Let's just like, should you back Amy Klobuchar, the woman who is, I think, only known in public, like her only position that I know that she knows is that she has gone through 3 campaign managers already and has reportedly thrown staplers at her staff. So, I don't know how that one will go down. Or Pete Buttigieg, who in the most recent South Carolina poll of African Americans polled at 0%. Or Beto. Beto's position is like skateboard. Isn't that his position? Like, he decided to launch a campaign for president based on him not being able to beat Ted Cruz in an election. Which, I mean, that sounds like a terrible reason to run for president. If you can't beat Ted Cruz, if you can't beat the Ted Cruz primary, then, like, what makes you think that you're going to become president? Um, we'll see. We'll see. There are actually some other presidential candidates that I really like a lot too. That I like some things about that are not getting the light of day, but I can't remember their names. Like, I know there's one guy whose entire campaign platform is climate change, and I'm like, ooh, that sounds nice. I can't wait to talk about him. And yeah, then there are some candidates who I think will be the series will be really good for. Like, there's a lot of people who give me shit because I'm not backing Elizabeth Warren, and it's because she's less of a superhero than people make her out to be. She's much more of a partisan that will do the not right thing to serve party over country, like she did when she and the Democrats voted to increase the military budget for when Donald Trump did a massive military increase in spending in the military recently. Or when she refused to back Sanders despite them being friends in the Senate and despite, them being super close politically. For years, she didn't come out to support him in 2016, which I think was kind of shitty. So, there's stuff to talk about. And Kamala Harris, who somehow people have convinced that she's not a monster when she, literally was one of the most draconian, state prosecutors in California history, oversaw, tons of executions, and, actively went out of her way to make sure that trans prisoners could not get health care and things like that. So, yeah. Ooh, there's so much to talk about. The series is... And it's a series that people have been wanting, so I should definitely do it. Okay. Let's see. Do you think the fact that talking about your childhood nostalgia has become socially acceptable in recent decades will make children's history easier to do in the future? Maybe. So, the thing about, children's history is interesting. I do think it'll make it easier to do, to an extent, yeah. I think, though, here's the thing, though, is that, when we think about our past, when we think about childhood nostalgia, we don't think as much about the culture and context that we lived in when we were kids. We think more about the... Oh, geez. Sorry. Something in my eye. We think more about, the media we consumed and the experiences we had. Children's history is fraught with difficulty because it's about the culture of a group of people who don't write about their experiences, who can't read, and are hard to communicate with. And so, if you think about the progression of the historical discipline as us trying to get information out of less and less obvious sources and trying to find the stories and the evidence that are harder and harder to get at. If you think of early history, the Annals School type of history, back in the 19th century when the historical discipline was first being founded, they just used the diaries of kings, the diaries of generals, and they just wrote these thick national histories that were just these long tomes of a list of things happening with no analysis or anything, and a lot of descriptions of battles. That was the earliest of history. And then as history developed as a field, it would be more about reading between the lines and reading what's called reading against the grain, which is when you are trying to understand a culture through the eyes of another culture that hates them, which is difficult. It involves a lot of cross-examination of evidence and heavy-duty analysis. And now, moving into how do you then find out about what kids are up to? And I'm not in children's history, so I don't really know how they're doing it, but it's a cool idea. I'm not sure though if our session with nostalgia, because I mean people have always had nostalgia for childhood. That's what Peter Pan was made for. Um, but you'll see, it's true. The thing about Peter Pan is true. When Peter Pan started as a play, before it became a book, but then it became a movie. When it was a play, when it aired in Britain for the first time, the creator of Peter Pan was a World War I veteran, and on very regularly when they were playing when the play was happening on the nights, the audience was like primarily made up of veterans, of World War I veterans, and they said that like during Peter Pan, the veterans would be like moved to tears every single night, and it was like, okay, there's some serious stuff going down with that. Peter Pan has a history. Yeah. What's going on if the U.S. bans assault weapons? Most gun owners aren't going to surrender their weapons voluntarily. I don't see this reducing deaths. Oh, look what we have. Sorry, I was going to answer your question, but the chat has distractions right now. Just waiting for the chat to get caught up, because we know what's going to happen. This is the part of the show where Phoebe comes to visit. Alrighty. Hey, Phoebes. 52 people are watching me pet a cat right now. So what so what's going to happen if the US bans assault weapons? Honestly, I think you did hit on something there, which is that the sort of simple the solution to the gun issue in America resists simple solutions. I think that one of the many things one of the things that a lot of probably more sane, like a lot of Democrats don't ever seem to have an answer to like what their end game about what to do about guns is. They always say, oh, we want common sense gun reform, or we want to do like, you know, gun control. Then they never say like what is gun control to you? Is it a total ban on guns? Because I tell you what, you've got a lot of constitutional hurdles if you want to do that one. If it is like some buffering around the edges, that you could do. I do think that there are some models of assault weapons that the U.S. could help reduce violence by banning future sales of them. But as you pointed out, people aren't going to surrender their guns, even if they did like a massive buyback program. They probably there's never going to be a successful situation when, you know, somebody goes door to door and starts taking away people's assault rifles. But when you can, and guns have a long shelf life. They can be used for like, I think like almost 100 years. So really, there's no quick fix to the gun issue in America. If your solution is to just take away the guns, the solution will have to be, dealing with keeping dangerous models of guns away from people. And on top of that, you're going to have to change gun culture, which is going to be a lot more difficult. There's no... And it's happened before. Like, the thing is, like, the idea that you can't move the needle on gun control is actually... it's a bit of a farce. For example, there was a ban on fully automatic guns that was put in place in the 1920s after the Valentine's Day Massacre. After the Valentine's Day Massacre, in which they used... I'm trying to remember what the actual technical word for this gun is, but they used Tommy guns, basically, which were fully automatic World War I era machine guns, that handheld machine guns, and those were very quickly banned after the St. Valentine's Day massacre, and well, people don't have them anymore. And there are some gun control laws in place, like you can't have a bazooka, for example. You can't have any fully automatic weapon. Like for if you guys remember at the shooting that happened in the shooting that happened in Las Vegas, what they used was something called a bump stock, which was a way to make firing a semi-automatic rifle, okay, for anyone who doesn't know gun terminology, an automatic rifle is one where your gun, when you pull down the trigger, will just keep shooting bullets until it runs out of bullets. A semi-automatic rifle is every time you pull the trigger, it'll shoot a bullet, but you don't have to reload until you run out of ammo. While, like, you know, a regular gun, like a long gun or like a rifle, you have to reload every bullet or every 5 bullets or something like that. You have to, like, you know, boom, boom, that kind of thing. And the amount of destructive force that comes with semi-automatic rifles is pretty intense, like the AR-15, which has been involved in a lot of shootings. And I feel like the kind of the name for the Tommy gun somebody pointed out is the Thompson submachine gun. But the amount of mass shootings that you could prevent by just getting rid of submachine guns or like semi-automatic rifles is a lot. Like if I feel like it would not be as difficult as people make it out to be for if there was like a strong Democratic Congress and a Democratic White House to ban like the AR-15. It'd be pretty. I feel like they could do that, or things like bump stocks. But because those are weapons of war, and I do think that keeping weapons of war out of the hands of people is not the worst idea in the world. But still, like, I don't know if anybody, Democrats seem to come off this way, but I don't know if any of them are like anti all guns existing. That'd be intense. That is definitely not something that you could do. But you could probably you could do a lot more to deal with racism, to deal with mental health and suicide prevention, to deal with to deal with the cultural and socio-political factors that cause mass violence, dealing with all of these, like, you know, incels and stuff. Like, you need to counter racism, you need to counter misogyny, you need to counter our stigma towards mental health, and have more and better suicide prevention, and a stronger and robust mental health care service. Like, these are the ways to stop mass gun violence. Just taking away the guns is not going to, it's going to make things better, but it's not going to solve the problem. So 1 through 8, somebody said most people who want to kill themselves will find a way. Well, that here's the thing about that. So the thing about getting rid of guns is like a method of suicide prevention. First of all, it's about, like, you know, if somebody is suicidal, and someone should be aware of that and intervene to try and take away their weapons, because right now there's not really a strong process for that. But on top of that, a lot of times when people commit suicide, I know this is this can be a very, very difficult topic to discuss. So we'll, you know, content warning, but I'll try to steer out of it as fast as I can. But suicide prevention is one of those things where there are long-term factors, but for the most part, somebody, like, when you're intervening in somebody who is trying to commit suicide, you're trying to intervene in a very small window of time. The thing is, like, if you want to stop somebody from committing suicide, for the most part, you just have to keep them from, you just have to keep them talking for even a few minutes. Because very often suicide's done in a very quick and impulsive fashion. The amount of time you can put between I'm going to do it and I've done it, then the chance that they won't do it increases drastically. The thing, though, is that guns make it very fast to impulsively do it and make it very easy. While other methods can sometimes can take longer and can allow more of a ramp to intervene. On top of that, you can have higher chance of intervention, because really, when you're talking about intervening to stop suicide, you are talking about a matter of seconds, and guns can make it much more lethal and much easier and faster. And that's mainly the issue about those things. That's like the mental health first aid advice, and that's why, for example, things like suicide crisis hotlines are so important. And by the way, if you are feeling suicidal, please call a line. There are plenty of them on the internet, and for the most part, what they will do is they will just talk to you and talk you through your feelings long enough to to walk you away from it, because it is just a matter of a few minutes. Are you trying to give me a pop?
Yeah, but I was waiting till the suicide talk was over.
Okay. Sorry. She was giving me a pop. I'm going to snap open the can, so I'm going to mute the mic real quick. Alrighty. That's good stuff. Okay, yeah, my throat was getting a little sore. All right, let's not talk about that stuff anymore, because that is dark and can be triggering. So, so there is a strong argument to disarming people who are prone to that act, because it does increase lethality and such. All right. Yeah, we call it pop here. Sorry. Okay. Fully automatic luxury LGBT plus transhumanist space ANCOM, which is an amazing handle. Any chance of an Orange Wave 2.0, or is that just a no? This year, I mean, anything can happen, as I've said in elections, but I am nervous. I don't have the highest hopes for the NDP this cycle. They're way down in the polls compared to 2015, and there's not exactly a whole lot of love for Jagmeet Singh, especially in Quebec, where there is a lot of NDP seats. So I could see the NDP taking quite a hit. Is this in Canada? Yes. I could see Canada. The NDP, by the way, for anyone. So just to give you like the quick rundown. The three major political parties in Canada are the Conservatives, who are the right-wing party, the Liberals, who are the center right-wing party, and the NDP, which are the center-left party. And so it stands for the New Democratic Party. So the reason why they said Orange Wave is because the NDP's colors are orange, so it's red, blue, and orange. And in 2011. There was something called the Orange Wave or the Orange Crush, where the NDP rode a huge wave and they got to official opposition, which is like the second biggest party in parliament for the first time in party history. And they got bumped down to third place in 2015, and they're probably going to lose seats this year, I would imagine. I would love to be wrong on that, though. I just think that the NDP have to face an internal reckoning, which is that they really, really got to stop hiring all of these Democratic Party consultants in America, and they really got to get over this idea that they are this party that never does negative campaigning, that is bright and beveled edges and friendly and always talking about families, when like right now the NDP has the opportunity to become like the NDP has the opportunity of becoming like the Labour Party. Like they chose Jagmeet Singh, who is he's kind of just this more center left, like friendly guy. But what we need right now is like a Jeremy Corbyn or like a Bernie Sanders. Like we need like someone who's fucking pissed. And because the NDP wins when it's mad. And right now, it's still trying to run every single candidate like they're a kindergarten teacher. And I think that that's why they're going to lose. I think that if the NDP had chosen Nikki Ashton in the leadership race in 2017, we'd be in a very different position right now. But we didn't, because the NDP doesn't have a spine. So, hopefully in 2019, when, here are the hopes, that Justin Trudeau doesn't lose grounds to the point where Andrew Scheer becomes prime minister, because that would suck. And let's hope that the NDP lose enough that Jagmeet Singh resigns in shame, and we have another leadership race, and this time we finally get Nikki Ashton in charge of the party. God. It's not hard, people. All right. Argos Panoptes wants to know my thoughts on ANCAPs. So ANCAPs, for anyone who doesn't know, are anarcho-capitalists, which is like a right-wing anarchism. It's like it's the closest thing to like what the end goal of like neoliberalism would be, if you think about it. It's the idea that to have no state and to have everything get replaced with private industry. So that's what it stands for, anarcho-capitalism. And so everything would be private. It makes no sense. It would be it would replace all of the few functions of the state that are democratic with ones that are not democratic. Like if you think about economics, and you think about all of the things that we use to organize ourselves in society as functions of society, rather than like making up this bullshit dichotomy between private and public, we have one institution that has a tiny amount of democracy, where once every few years we get a little bit of say in what happens. Then the majority of our lives, and a good chunk of our existence, we live in these like what are called like little islands of despotism, where you go to work and all of a sudden your workplace, which is another function of society, it's a part of your life, is a dictatorship. So you can have your society where there's democracy, and then you go to your little pockets of dictatorships. And ANCAPs want those little pockets of dictatorships to cover everything, which, given like study, if you're ever interested, look at the SOAR program that happened in Sears, where they tried to run the inside of like the internal. They tried to run Sears internally like it was a free market, and the place fell apart because of it. Honestly, like, as an anarchist, my idea is to, like, in my mind, that is not, that, like, if you are dedicated to anarchist ideals, that you believe that hierarchy, like the axiom that hierarchy is an undesirable state of affairs, and that if you can replace it with something else, then do so. That flies in the face of anarcho-capitalism. And this is why I don't think that anarcho-capitalism is a form of anarchism, because it really is just taking, if you think about, like I said, if you think about everything as just the groups and institutions that we use to run society, if the government and corporations and companies are all just, they're all just different organizations that we pass through in our day-to-day lives, then they want the most democratic institution we have to be replaced with the least democratic institutions we have, which would make things less free, not more free. Well, I would prefer if, if the things that were more totalitarian, like governments and corporations, and or if all the things, like all the private sector, were run more like a democracy. And then I wish that the government also was more like a democracy. And then I would make the argument that we probably don't need to have a single organization that has a monopoly on state power. Because if you think about it, that's not very democratic, and there's probably a better way to distribute all of those functions in a way that's more egalitarian and horizontally organized. That's my entire anarchist philosophy laid bare, and why I don't think ANCAPs are anarchists. Check my Twitter. Oh boy. I love it. I love it. Famous quotes. So this is another meme made by Comrade Jeb, who loves to make a good meme. Let me see if I can. Let me download this so I can show you guys. And you know me, I'm always a good fan. I'm always loving a good fan art and a good fan meme. So let me just replace this with this. I'm working on it. I'm working on it, guys. I can't see the chat right now, but we'll go here. It's gonna be a little slapdash, but there we go. We need someone who's fucking pissed. All right. So, save to my. I have a fan art folder, and I'll save it in there. But yeah, I do think that a lot of the reasons why people think that you can get away with, like, a lot of the ways that we describe capitalism, we get away with tolerating totalitarian regimes because we've built in our heads this dichotomy between something that's private and something that's public, when really they're just organizations. Show that to Mom. Oh, man. All right. I asked you about being frozen and waking up in a communist future. What if I wasn't really going to be... What if I wasn't really going to be you? What if it was a clone with your mind downloaded to it? Would you consent to that? Oh, sure. Yeah. Go and send my brain clone to the future. I would love... I mean, I would love to think that something in my... some form of my essence could see the glorious future where we share everything in common, and we no longer are. It would just like I think many of you would agree with me that, like, we live in this world where we feel like everything is this ruthless competition. And we just feel like every day this pressure that, like, you got to do well. You got to do well in school, because then you got to go to the good school so that you can get into the good job, because if you don't get into the good job, then you're going to be homeless, and then if you get in the good job, then you got to pull in the extra hours. You got to hustle. You know, you got to hashtag hustle. You got to work after hours. You got to work on the weekends. You got to have your work on your phone so that your boss can send you texts at 10 o'clock at night. Like, you've got to always be on. You got to always go, because if you don't keep going, you're going to fail. You're going to fail. And, like, just having one day in the socialist utopia where you wake up and none of that's there, you know? That you've got, like, there's still work. It's all right. You don't have to, you don't have that constant pressure to succeed or die. And I'm just thinking, like, man, just be like a nice exhale, you know, just like, you wouldn't have to worry. I feel like that would be nice. Be very nice. I also noticed that my mom is watching the stream again. Hi, Mom. I see you're in the chat. Guess I should be a little better behave now. Should stop cussing. Whatever. My mom, when I was a kid, was the one who was like, "Don't you fucking swear, I'll put soap in your mouth." So, you know, I was never going to be a kid who, I was never going to grow up into somebody who was, you know, who used good language. All right. What is Shira's Law's view on LGBTQ peoples? I watched your video on it, but I wondered how Sharia law can address the more problematic aspects like stoning and women's testimony equaling half of a man's testimony. Well, what I'll say to that, Sirloin, is, yeah, that's some super problematic shit. Most of that comes from the fact that the Islamic code was written into law, was, like, you know, formalized and decided upon in, like, the 9th century, in, like, the 800s AD. It's actually, for the period that it was made, very progressive. But, as you said, it's very, like, to follow it to a T today would be considered extremely cruel and oppressive. The good thing is, most countries don't. Sharia law is no longer this all-encompassing legal code anymore. I don't know if, okay, so there's a couple things you can go on. So one, like, a lot of the things you're talking about with stoning and a woman's testimony being worth half of a man's testimony is part of the Sharia code that is really only practiced anymore in countries like Iran and Saudi Arabia. Most other Middle Eastern countries don't do it. Or even if it's on the books, they never enforce it. On top of that, a lot of what is in the Sharia code now, to most Muslims, is less of a commandment of how things have to be and more of a directive for how people should be. It is a moral guidance. It is the way to properly approach life. Because Sharia also has, like, proper prayer times and things you should abstain from, and being a trustworthy person, like all those kinds of things. For now, right now, in most Middle Eastern countries, when you're talking about Sharia law, and when you're talking about, like, Sharia courts in most of the Middle East, but also, like, when Sharia courts get set up in, like, the West and such, what they are talking about is basically family courts. Let me just find something real quick. Because they're not the only people to do this. There is... I can't remember what it's called, and I can't find a name for it. But Many religious figures have, like right now, Sharia courts are, though in those places, function more for very specific and narrow uses of the law. Specifically, sort of like how some people will go and see a minister. So, like Christians, when they're divorcing, some of them, if they're very Christian, will go to see a minister to work out how things should be done in like a biblically acceptable format. Muslims, Islam in general being a very legalistic and scholarly religion, has like an entire scholar class of people who decide on these things. And so very often, Sharia courts are used for settling things like divorce, which is allowed in Islam, not allowed in any other of the Abrahamic religions, as far as I know, save for King Henry VIII. So divorce is legally codified, so a lot of times Sharia courts are for handling divorce, handling family, handling inheritance, because they go to these courts to figure out what is the proper Islamic way to distribute the goods from the person, the family who recently died, and that kind of stuff. Like, it's very benign and also usually optional. So for the most part, they're not the only groups that do this. I know that Jews have sort of a family court angle to it that they use. Like, I know that there's I don't know what they're called. I was trying to look up what they're called, but there are Jewish family courts that do the exact same thing as Sharia courts that are found all over the West, and nobody bats an eyelash. So that's the answer, Sirloin, is that Sharia's view on LGBTQ plus people is bad, and its view on gender is very outdated. Luckily, only 2 countries practice it, and I don't think there's anybody on Earth who is saying, man, Saudi Arabia doing a bang-up job in the treating women good department. All right, next is Logan Anderson. Thoughts on the Upper South? You're talking about, like, people in the South? Like, the American South?
Yeah, there was a discussion later that the Upper South is like Appalachia.
Oh, like Appalachia?
And, like, that area.
Okay, well, if we're talking about, like, Appalachia, like West Virginia and stuff like that, it's a region that has experienced a lot of poverty. There was a documentary that I watched years and years ago now. Would have been like almost a decade ago. That was about people who live in Appalachia and like the sort of almost oppressive poverty that they live in. You'd almost actually be surprised how, when you go to some places in the South, you'll be surprised by like how deep poverty can be in the United States. There's some pretty like what would be a good example? I went to Mississippi once, and Mississippi was a very, very sad place and very impoverished. But I know that the people who live in Appalachia, especially since the drying up of the coal mines, have experienced a lot of poverty. And they also have a very distinct culture that has developed by living centuries in these very remote mountain communities. I don't know what the name of the documentary is, or else I would show it for you, because the last time I saw it was like in 2009 or 10, so I can't really tell you what it was, but it was good. It came from this period, which I think might have been my favorite semester of my community college days, where I had a Friday morning course, which was one of my general electives, and it was a Friday morning class on documentary films. And I would go to class for like 10 a.m. or 9 a.m. or whatever it was, I can't remember anymore. And in the class, we would watch a documentary, and they were usually pretty good documentaries too. We would then talk about it for a little bit, maybe for about half an hour, and then I could go home. And then my weekend started. What a great way to start your weekend, eh? Friday morning class, and then you're just done. It was great. I saw a few documentaries I had already seen before, like Grizzly Man and Bowling for Columbine. But I saw some other cool documentaries like this one. I saw a documentary, a biography of Robert Crumb, the comic book artist, which was really messed up. I saw Triumph of the Will, the Nazi propaganda documentary. No subtitles or anything. Yeah, so that was a good semester. And then the only assignment was a final paper in which you did a write-up analysis of a documentary of your choice. In which I think I was like at my peak edgy atheist days, so I did the movie Religulous, the Bill Maher going around and being a dick to people documentary. So there's that. Do you have the same problem with so much money in politics like we do here in Argentina? Yeah. It's not as bad as the United States, but we still do have terrible lobbyist monies. The fact that, like, the Conservative Party of Canada almost entirely dedicates its whole platform to serving the interests of the Alberta energy industry, that says something. Suppose we kept capitalism but mandated all companies must be cooperatives. I mean, I think that would be a step forward. Would that be the end? No. I mean, I still think that even under co-ops, like even if co-ops were run like they were democratic co-ops, then on top of, but like you still had market competition between them, it would still be an inefficient economic system that would still leave people in the dust. The only option is, you need to dump it. You need to dump the method of distributing goods and services via competition and instead replace it with a planned system that is highly maintained by the wonderful leaps in logistics, technology, and science that we've made in the last few decades, and just use that for the whole economy. I don't see the problem here. I said I'm knee deep in that book, The People's Republic of Walmart, and I am learning right now that planned economies work way better than market economies, like way better. All right. Oh, I need to check Twitter again? Oh, dearie me. I wish that was more than a Photoshop. Someone's got to make that a Hoi 4 mod. That'd be fun. Oh, man. I feel like I put that out into the universe, and now it's going to happen. Oh, okay. I'm going to save that one, too, actually, while I'm here, so I don't forget. Someone made me... this is another Comrade Jeb meme where they put me as the communist leader of the of Canada... as Hearts of Iron 4, it's a World War II politics and war simulator. But for some reason the Holocaust doesn't exist because that game has some serious problematic aspects, but that's a fact. Oh, man. But yeah, gotta love a planned economy. Wouldn't be like the Soviets. Think about it. Think about, like, all the technology that makes, like, Walmart and Amazon function. We could just take all of that infrastructure and all of that technology and all of the science that's been developed for that and then just use it for everything. Can you imagine if everything worked like Amazon? Man, it would be so efficient. And then on top of that, we wouldn't have to maximize profits. We could maximize on all the general goods, like making sure that people have all the things they need and making sure that the environment is being served well, and you don't have to worry about constantly making more money. I feel like we would end up in we would have an economy that is pretty awesome. But unfortunately, we just keep having to compete with each other, and it just keeps making things worse. We really got to get over that. We have to realize that cooperation breeds innovation, and that if we can, and that really planned economies are the most efficient, it's just the most efficient way to promote innovation and also maximize on efficiency. Unfortunately, that's not the case right now. Is Thanosism a real ideology? Well, I don't think so. I know that there's like a weird branch of communism, like a weird like break off of like Trotskyists that want to like bring all of the good communists onto an island and then like nuke the world into oblivion and then sort of rebuild communism from the ashes or something, and that by doing that you'll somehow end up with somehow, because communism is an immortal science, that UFOs would come help because the aliens would all be communists. Are you talking about posadism? Yes, I am. It's an absolute batshit insane ideology, but that's the closest I can think of to like Thanosism or like wiping out half of humanity. All right, Gad Yariv. Israel's Netanyahu won elections in April. His government is falling apart, heading for elections in August. If America had a parliamentary system, could Trump maintain a government? Probably not. Actually, I think there was like a video that was made not too long ago that it was run by it was a collaboration between The Exploration and Soliloquy, where they showed what America might look like if it was a parliament, where like Donald Trump would be prime minister by a slim margin and it would be a minority government. But like, yeah, in my mind, I think that if you had a non-gerrymandered parliamentary democracy in America, you would probably never see a Republican government ever again. Link to it, please. All right, let me see if I can find it. It's a few years old now, so it might take me a bit to find. Oh, that was easy. I'll put a link in the chat. So that's the video I was talking about. Okay. Next question here. I realize I am an hour and a half behind on questions now. Oh my god. I'm on page 2 and there are 5 pages of questions. I think I should move faster. What about eggs? What about eggs? Laura Tatum. Oh, is about milkshakes and such. Yeah, eggs are also acceptable. I'm trying to join the IWW. I need to do so face-to-face due to safety reasons. Yes, there's a lot of issues with cops trying to infiltrate the IWW. Any idea where I could do it in Denver? I tried emailing them to ask, but I've gotten no reply. I have no answer for you, Laura. If there is anybody here who is associated with the Denver IWW, please help her in the chat. Yankee Louver 100. Does trauma theory exist in history? I think it does. There's trauma studies, which is part of memory studies, which includes history. It's a bit more interdisciplinary, but I was definitely studying trauma theory as part of my dissertation, but I knew that I was borrowing it from a bunch of disciplines, so I'm not sure how well it's penetrated the traditional history discipline. Okay. What about eggs, fish, or poo against fascists? Or is it just shoes or milkshakes that Step Back endorses or use against fascists? I mean, your heart's in the right place, some random geek. As long as you're not shooting them or like, you know, I feel like you'll know in your heart whether or not I'll support what you decide to throw at your local shitty politician. If it makes them smelly and embarrassed and have to go wash up, good. If it makes them have to go to the hospital, not so good. All right. Thoughts on a party that existed for a very short time here in Canada? The online party was supposed to be something like a direct democracy party. It never took off, though. I remember when the online party was started. I was honestly trying to become. I entertained for like an afternoon trying to become an MP or an MP candidate for Burlington on the online party ticket, but I eventually didn't go through with it because I didn't want to get involved with that. So there you go. No bricks. But I remember the online party. I remember getting a little excited about them, but then they never ran any candidates, so I guess never really did anything. Is there an ideology for just hating other humans in general? I know a few people who probably fully fit into that. You could call that cynicism, or you could call that misanthropy, basically. October 7th, 2011 is the anniversary of the start of the war in Afghanistan. 18 years on that day. Remember, it took the Allies 5 years to beat Hitler. Remind warmongers of that. Is this worse than Hitler? It's not. I mean, World War II was a total war that involved the entire planet. The reason why Afghanistan has lasted so much longer is because of a persistent insurgency. There was really no way there's no way to convince, like, hardcore Wahhabist rebels who can hide in the mountains. I would probably say Afghanistan is more close to Vietnam and the Viet Cong than, like, imagine the Viet Cong, but instead of communism, it's like radical Wahhabist anti-Americanism. And you've got more of an idea of what's going on in Afghanistan and why it's taken them so long to take over. And yeah, it's called the Graveyard of Empires because Afghanistan is full of like mountain ranges that have lots of caves, and it's also very desolate in certain places, and so it's very easy to think you conquered Afghanistan, but the people of Afghanistan have a lot of avenues for fighting back. If America declares war on Iran, how do you think it would go? Like, what happens immediately after the first shots are fired, and what are the reactions of other countries? Well, okay. So there's a couple things. One, Iran is a ally of Russia. So the first thing you would need to find out is, what does Vladimir Putin do? If Vladimir Putin thinks that getting involved... Okay, so there's a couple things. The United States would have a hell of a time in a conventional war against Iran. The U.S. military is extremely... it's extremely deployed. It's been used all over the place. But Iran is not Iraq. It's not Afghanistan. Iran is a powerful local... Like, it's a local power. The Middle East, in general, is in a state of Cold War between Iran and Saudi Arabia. So if the U.S. went to war with Iran, not only would, like, Iran have a modern military with, like, an air force and shit, but on top of that, so they put up quite a fight in their own right, but on top of that, they have allied groups and, they have countries that they have influence over, and they have groups they have influence over all over the place. Like, Hezbollah, for example, would be very eager to help out. Or, Bashar al-Assad, who just recently had Iran help settle his civil war issue. Like, a lot, and also mention, like, you would find probably lots of agitators in, say, Iraq, a country that is majority Shia, which is the religious, like, the Cold War is more or less split on Shia-Sunni lines, and Iraq is a country that is majority Shia and is occupied by the United States. So you can imagine that would flare up some rebellion, and these are not like ISIS. These are not like Al Qaeda. This is a completely different sect of Islam, a sect of Islam that has been fighting ISIS and Al Qaeda for much longer than the War on Terror. But it would be disastrous. And what I think is the scarier part of that is it would probably, the military reality the U.S. would be really tough for them. Iran could seriously disrupt oil prices with their petrol exports, and then on top of that, the U.S. might get pressured to use unconventional weapons, which could escalate into the destruction of the whole world. So, yeah, it would not end easy for anybody. I also just realized I have no reason to be wearing these headphones. I can just take them off, and it would be much more comfortable for me. And you can enjoy the burgeoning Wolverine hairdo that I'm getting right now. Yeah. Anyone know how they plan on dealing with Ireland if they leave? Seems way too complicated to move forward. Yeah, I don't see a good solution that doesn't result in either the trouble starting up again, or if Brexit happens and they have to figure out what to do with Ireland, I see Irish reunification more likely than them actually working out a border that people are happy with. Which would be weird to see, a united Ireland. Okay. Does the Middle East turn into Syria and everything crumbles into war? I don't think. I think it will be a much worse than what happened in Syria. But, yeah. Okay. When 9/11 happened, I was 8. I was like, well, that's a bad thing that happened half the way around the world. I wonder what's going to happen on Dragon Ball Z tonight. Is that weird/cold? No. You were 8. That is a very natural 8-year-old response. The Sonic animation thing. Is it okay to complain about a substandard product if you know the exploited workers are going to be tasked with fixing it? Listen, I think that Twitter was having a lot of fun ripping on Sonic, because I'm pretty sure everyone knows that there's no way that Sonic's not going to suck. Like, it's a doomed idea from the start. The way to make a good Sonic movie is don't make a Sonic movie, but they're doing it anyway. And then when the trailer came out, everyone had a good time showing how ridiculous and terrible it was. So, but then they responded to that as criticism, and they're like, all right, we're going to do it. But then they actually push back the release date so that they can fix the animation. But honestly, like, it's still going to, they're going to spend a whole bunch of money and take a whole bunch of extra time for a movie that's still going to suck. All right. Is the LGBTQ movement choice of the rainbow flag related somehow to the Jesse Jackson Rainbow Coalition? I don't think so. I think they're unrelated. What history podcast do you like? I really enjoy Mike Duncan stuff, but I've listened to it all. I have tried several times to listen to the Mike Duncan podcasts. Can never. Let me see. I'm going to go through my list of podcasts and see which ones are history ones. There's a podcast called It Could Happen Here that I haven't listened to yet, but I've got on my list. The United States of Anxiety. That is a good history podcast. Hardcore History, obviously. There is a mini-series run by Gimlet called Uncivil. That is a Civil War series that I thought was really good. There's Revisionist History, which is okay. You have to realize that it's made by Malcolm Gladwell, who doesn't exactly have the best opinions, but he's a good storyteller, and he covered interesting, quirky subjects that I never anticipated I was going to enjoy. Um, yeah, those are all the history podcasts I listen to. I've pared down my podcasts. I've pared down my podcasts a lot lately. Okay. I'm not going to go through all my podcasts. I imagine that would be boring as hell. You love It Could Happen Here. I haven't listened to it yet. It's on my list. Right now, I'm listening through my backlog of Citations Needed. And then I think after that, Citations Needed is a good podcast, by the way. And then I'm listening to the Adam Ruins Everything podcast because I found out that it's over. So I'm just going to listen to all of it. Because it's been replaced with a new podcast called Factually. Do you actually make money doing this? Yes. Yes, I do, Eliana. I don't know why I answered that one right away, but it was just that there. Yeah. It's my living. I make my living doing this pretty much. It is my biggest source of income at the moment. I don't know if you answered this, but have you ever read The Burden of Guilt? It's a bit older and looks into the interwar period of Germany through politics. It's a bit too centrist for me. I have not. I don't really... The world wars are not really my favorite point in history, so I don't really touch a whole lot of those things. Do leftists like you support democracy? Hell yeah. I love democracy. I think I like democracy more than most people. I like democracy so much that I don't think that we should do it every 4 years. I think we should be doing it all the time. That's my opinion. Are all forms of racial pride formed in opposition to something else? I mean, race is as like a category created through colonization and conquest, so that's not a... I mean, if you want to read more on that, you should read Benedict Anderson's Imagined Communities. But having a opposition or creating an identity in opposition to another group is a fairly common way for people to make an identity, because you don't really, like, if you think about it, you don't really have a pan identity unless you understand an other. Otherwise, you don't really have... There's no us if there's no them, if that makes sense. Otherwise, it's like, what if a fish in water type thing? Does a fish in water know it's wet? Nixon said he thought UBI would be the end of poverty. Giving everyone $12,000 a year would end poverty. Definitely not. I have complex feelings about universal basic income, and I do not think that it is a wholly fixing solution to all of our economic woes, like a lot of people, especially people in the Yang Gang, seem to think it is. So, when I get into Andrew Yang's video, I'll probably talk more about it. But there is, let me see if I can find it for you. There's a really good Mexi video on UBI that actually wraps up a lot of my feelings on it. So let me see if I can get that for you. So this is a video by Mexi. It's a pretty good breakdown on UBI and the issues inherent with it. So there you go. All right. What's next? All right. I think I'm back. Am I back? Friends? All right.
Except now you only have 19 people watching.
Ah, shite.
You lost over half.
That sucks. Well, they'll come back eventually. Okay. So, or if they don't, we're back to 30, so we're good. We only lost like 20%. Okay. So on UBI and poverty, there is a really great Mexi video that I just linked in the chat. I apparently, while disconnected, that wraps up a lot of the feelings that I have about UBI. And definitely when I get to the Andrew Yang video of this series I'm doing, that I'll definitely talk more about UBI then. So we'll go with that. Are you a doomer or a bloomer or a zoomer or a boomer? I don't know how to answer that question. I am a downwardly mobile millennial. Jeez, there's like a garbage truck outside. Does it come across as needy and possessive when I say bitchy stuff in the chat because you or other YouTubers haven't answered my question yet? Some people on your Discord said that to me. Well, I mean, I'm a person. I'm not property. I definitely understand that you get excited about getting your question answered. I try to be as open as possible. I think that I have probably backed myself into a bit of a corner because I've made myself a very accessible person. And as Step Back continues to grow, it's going to be more and more difficult to keep that kind of line of communication open. All I hope, I'll keep trying my best to be a person who gives a lot of myself to others. I just hope that you will be understanding that, I am but one person who makes many mistakes. And I hope that you don't take it personally and know that it's not some slight against you. It's just that, I am but one person and I can only do so much. Should I make my website in assembly? I have no idea. Should I learn a foreign language to read one book that hasn't been translated yet? I think you're making a joke about Pete Buttigieg, who did that for Norwegian, I want to say. If you really want to read the book, do it up. Does Pete Buttigieg actually have stances on things now? Not that I've heard of yet. How long do you think it will take for a Gen Xer to become president? It's already happened. Barack Obama was a Gen X president. How do you think history will remember Obama? Will he be remembered as the hope and change guy or as the warmonger he is? I don't think he'll be remembered as either. I think he'll be remembered as the first black president and someone who basically was elected in the wake of the George Bush backlash but inherited a major economic recession and proceeded to do nothing to change the systemic issues that brought it about. I think that there was when Barack Obama was first running for president, a lot of people said that he was too inexperienced, and I would say that he kind of showed that. Are you a lizard person? I'm more of a dog person who doesn't have a dog. So now I'm a cat person until I can get a dog. Then I'll be a dog person. I am a dog person who has been raised only with cats. When there is a dog that is my own, it'll change my soul. I want a dog so bad. All right. Considering the vast majority of military and police are recruited from the working class, do you think the bourgeoisie could maintain control of them if 95% of people turned against capitalism? Yeah. They have the, I don't know if you've seen the Blue Lives Matter shit, but soldiers and police officers are very indoctrinated. They are chosen from amongst the most loyal to the upper class, so I don't see, they are self-selected out to be the loyal people, Do more people really support Joe Biden over Bernie Sanders? I can understand Joe Biden having more of a platform, but Bernie Sanders has a more favorable reputation. At this moment, I think there's been no debates yet. There's been no strong things done. The first debate isn't until July, so right now I think it's just name recognition. But yeah, right now he is leading in the polls because when people give you a list of names that you don't recognize and you recognize Joe Biden, then people say, oh, I know that guy. And he also is very popular amongst African Americans. I don't know why, because of his horrible war on crime background, but or war on drugs and mass incarceration background, but I imagine that has to do with residual Obama energy, and so I don't know how long that'll last when he starts. Biden's like strength in the polls will only last until he starts talking. It's always with Biden, it's always downhill from there. Keep in mind, in the 1987 primaries, he like had to bow out because he was plagiarizing speeches. So, your anarchist planet wants to have some kind of treaty with the alien species that landed on there last week. How do you ratify a treaty without a central government? I don't imagine you would make a treaty. Treaties are things that governments do. Plus, I feel like aliens, like, I don't imagine that we're going to end up with, if we ever meet intelligent aliens, they're not going to think in the same way we do. They're going to have a completely different mindset towards everything because they'll be truly alien biology. So I have no idea what things would be like with them. You really can't look forward to what's going to happen with that. Would you rather live in neo-feudalism or UBI dictatorship? Oh, God. It's a would you rather from fucking hell. I mean, we live in neo-feudalism. I'll take UBI dictatorship for a little bit. Actually, no. Let's go with neo-feudalism. That one's good. I think I prefer that. Thomas Paine, would he be an anarchist? I don't think so. The word, like, anarchist didn't exist back when Thomas Paine was alive. Why do you think old atheist channels of the past have turned into edgy shitlord with even less views than before? Argos, hold on to that question. I have been working very slowly on a documentary that I do not know where it's going to get posted or anything like that, but I've been working on a video on that exact subject, and other things for a while. And whenever that comes out, I'll have a more nuanced opinion. Why has Saudi Arabia not been invaded or had a revolution yet? Because they have shit tons of weapons and they have the support of a good majority of the world. Well, at least the United States. And the United States has all the nukes, and so you can't fuck with them. Why is Islam known for being so legalistic? It comes from the... I'm trying to think where it comes from. It comes from, at its origin, the fact that, unlike Judaism and Christianity, Muslims believe that the Quran, as written, is not written by human hands. Or it was dictated, I guess I should say. So they believe that the Quran, in classical Arabic, is the literal divine word of God. And so therefore, they put a lot of special significance, divine significance, on the Quran. So it would make sense that studying the Quran has developed into if it is the only thing you have that is direct words from the divine, that you are going to obsessively study it to find answers to everything. And so Muslim scholars have done exactly that. I got on Sunday night a sort of Muslim street preacher gave me this like pamphlet and showed about how like some Islamic scholar had gone through the Quran and like started finding like the amount of times the name man and the number of times the word woman are used are exactly the same, which shows that women are equal, and like kinds of things like there's a lot of reading into the Quran in very specific and strange ways that show the fact that Islam is a very diverse and big religion that has a lot of interesting interpretations. All right. Dusty saying he thinks Muhammad is non-politically correct word for unintelligent and immoral. Why is it not okay for him to criticize Muhammad when, to him and you, Muhammad was just a man? Because it's not about him and me. It's because Muhammad is an extremely important figure to something that means a lot to a lot of people. So it's unnecessarily, just for the sake of being mean, taking a dump on an important figure to an extremely important figure to a large religion. And when you are a believer in a religion, it's a core part of your personal identity. And so you're going to take it very personally. What do you think about UKIP being torn apart by the Brexit Party? I actually don't know too much about the Brexit Party. The far right is bad. If they're fighting about that, I don't know. Are you guys in support of term limits for members of U.S. Congress? Term limits have issues of their own. I could see there being uses for it, for kind of countering the machine and like lifelong politicians. I don't think it would solve as many problems as people think it would. And definitely I think that there are better solutions that we can push our energy towards for having democratic reform in US politics. Why do you and many other teachers and educators are against suicide? Mainlander said God gave all entities the will to die. I would think that I do believe that people have ownership over their own bodies, and that informed consent to end your life is something that I fundamentally agree with. The problem, though, is that when it comes to the suicide question, is that many times when people commit suicide, they're doing it not out of something that they really desire to do, but out of a sort of moment of spiral and panic. And that many people who have attempted suicide and survived very immediately express regret for doing it. Like I said, it's very much a thing that the desire to do it and doing it is a very small window of time. And outside of that, you're thinking of classical depression, which is, you're not in a sound state of mind. What is trauma theory? That is the study of how traumatic events affect cultures and identities. It has been added into. There's a lot of it in Jewish studies about how the legacy of the Holocaust has affected Jewish communities even generations after, when it's out of living memory. Have you heard of Deleonism? And if so, what do you think of it? I have not heard of Deleonism, sorry. What do you think of the current Kurdistan independence movements? After hearing about Kurdish oppression of Christian minorities, I don't think we should support any of that unless you don't oppress them. I like the Rojava movement. I don't think Rojava is oppressing Christians. As far as I know, it's a, pretty libertarian socialist commune thing. I think that it's too blanket of a term. Kurdistan is Kurdistan ranges all over the political spectrum and is in several countries. There's a Kurdistan independence movement in Turkey, there's one in Iran, there's one in Iraq, and there's one in Syria. There's several in Syria. And all of them are different political factions and have different positions. Kurdistan in Iraq, which is more or less an autonomous province within Iraq, has its own military called the Peshmerga that fought against ISIS for the most part. And you know, oh god damn it. And yeah, so like I think that just referring to Kurdish independence as like one thing is a bit of a making it a bit of a monolith, which it's not. Rojova's cool though. Do you like Trump? Oh, so that's the person we banned, isn't it? No, I don't. Thoughts on the Young Patriots? I don't know who they are. Goddamn. Okay. What if the DNC doesn't put Bernie and Joe in the same debate? Yeah, so this is the thing that's coming up is that they're going to have to do 2 debates because there's so many candidates that qualify. I imagine that after the first or second debate that the field's going to clear up quite a bit. A lot of the people who don't see their numbers go up significantly after the first or second debate are going to drop out. And before long, Bernie and Biden will be in the same debate stage. It'll be a point, like, in my opinion, I think that it's going to come down to the 2 of them overall. Like, I think that the last debates, like, there's going to be a lot of debates, and by the end, it's just going to be the 2 of them for the most part. Unless, like, you know, someone decides to obstinately stay in for some reason. But I think that, like, a lot of people who are running for president don't anticipate they're going to become president this time around, but they're just trying to get their name out there so that they can run again later. Like, I think, like, Pete Buttigieg, for example, is an example of someone who's doing that. I think Kamala Harris and Cory Booker and all of them are sort of doing the same thing. Anyways. One of your mods told me that it's wrong of me to get upset if you're not answering my questions because I'm hinging my emotions on you without consent. Do you agree? I mean, I think for the most part that just feels like it's not good for you. Trust me, relying on me as any sort of emotional support is not a good thing, especially because this is mostly a parasocial relationship, and I don't want to see anybody get hurt because they saw something in me that they didn't that wasn't there. But it's not hurting me, but it would definitely hurt my feelings to find out that it was hurting someone else. I'm just a person who talks into a screen. What's with the white kitty flashing in the corner of the screen? Oh, I think that I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out how this program works, but I think that's when someone subscribes, and that's Tabby. Okay. I think that was the last question. All right. I could definitely use a bedtime. So thank you guys. That was a lot of good questions. I appreciate every one of you for coming out and talking with me and giving me awesome things to branch off about. It was a little touch and go there with the whole... one more question. All right, let's just do one more, and then I'll wrap up. If you could go back in time and one thing you could do in the world today is the utopia we want so much, but the thing from the Nazis win World War II. Whoa, okay. So you go back and do one thing to change humanity, what that would be good for it? What would it be? I mean, shooting Hitler when he was young would be a pretty good one. I feel like that would be a solid pick. All right. After talking about killing Hitler, everybody, have an amazing night. Be good to yourselves. Be good to others. I'm going to be doing a stream on Friday afternoon, so please come out. Please come out and enjoy yourself. And there'll be a new video on Friday. And be happy.